Afternoon. Give everybody a couple minutes to show up. Feel free to start signing in and putting things on the agenda doc if you have things to talk about. People, 2 more minutes to show up. All right, I guess we have a small group today. Let's kick off with introductions and new faces. Frankie, have you been to one of these before? Want to just introduce yourself to the Heroku people, which I guess is just Jesse right now.
Sure. Hey, I'm Frankie. I'm on the VMware and Buildpacks feature engineering team.
Cool. And then release planning and updates. I guess no Javier this time, so Emily, any lifecycle updates?
Our feature complete, almost. Everything's PR, we just gotta merge it. Lifecycle 092, so I think we'll get draft release up soon and then tell people to try it out and ship it sometime in the next week.
Awesome. Somebody want to give other updates? Anybody on the platform side?
I think we got 0.14.1 out shortly after 0.14.0. I don't know if that's new this week, but other than that, we don't have anything that I'm aware of planned for the immediate future, and we'll be working on the 0.15 release cycle.
Awesome. All right, and then we'll go through outstanding ROCs. 1 second to share. And reminder as I go through this, if you think of things you want to talk about this week, please put them on the agenda list. All right, so first thing is issues and labels. Important thing this time, Forrest was very keen on reminding me, we should be adding, when things have to do with the spec, we should be adding, according to another RFC that got merged earlier, we should be adding labels to them to correspond to their platform, or whether they're, I don't know, something.
Speaking of that RFC, the thing we're looking at now isn't a real RFC. It's updating the RFC repo to describe changes we made in that RFC, so how we're going to label issues, and it also describes the workflow for creating issues and updates our automation so that the merge RFC script will add issues into the RFC text when it merges. So for folks that don't need to approve things going into this repo, hopefully everything in here should match what you expected after approving the other RFCs. And then you can take a look and you can merge this. And there are other RFCs that are ready to merge that we'll see as we go through the list that I haven't merged because I would like to use the script in the process here.
Awesome. Is this an RFC or is this a change to the RFC's repo? That does this?
It's
what
not an
kind of
RFC.
approval does it need? Right.
This is an implementation of RFCs in the RFC's repo.
Yeah, so it won't.
I don't know what the rules are for that.
Yeah, it won't be
maybe
subject
like
to the
one
same
or two people
rules.
saying yes would be nice.
Yeah.
I think it's still subject to, because it's like just a repo owned by the core team.
So subject to core team approval.
Yeah, but I don't think it even has to be like majority and FCP rules or anything like that. I think it's like
Yeah, it's
one
not an
other.
FCP. It's like
Yeah.
how we treat spec basically, right?
Yep.
How we own that repo.
So Terrence, once you approve, we can get it merged.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we want to clarify for people following directions, like what the actual options are. I think spec probably maybe doesn't need to because that matches what is in Buildpacks/spec, but
For audience, I
audience
actually really
may not be as clear.
strongly thought about that. But
we
given
can also
that
take that offline if you want.
yeah, given that it wasn't outlined in the original RFC, I didn't want to introduce anything potentially controversial here, like deciding what the different options for audience are. Just that this is how we name space.
Yeah, the other alternative is we just pre-create the labels, and it's like obviously whatever's under spec and whatever's on audience.
Yeah, we can pre-create the ones that we can think of. I also feel like
because we can always add more, so it doesn't have to be exhaustive.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just nice to not have to be like, well, I have to figure out what this is, right?
Cool. So waiting on approval from Terrence, I guess. I'm going to move on. This doesn't, I was unclear what we're supposed to be labeling spec related things as. This doesn't need a label for, it's not spec related. Is it just that we're labeling things with spec if they're?
I think it's for actual RFCs we're labeling.
Yeah, but what is that label? What am I labeling?
It's like platform or build pack or distribution or I guess this would be an extension spec maybe. I don't know. New extension specs maybe go under /section. I think that's like partly the point of my previous comment in the other RFC was that it would be good to just be clear what we should be doing here.
Of course, you had a very particular idea of what this was.
No, I left it intentionally generic to sort of allow for this to turn into what it should be. My thought going into it would be that it would be something along the lines of distribution platform, build pack, and extension for the spec. And for authors, I was kind of under the impression that we would come up with some predefined set of labels for audience. So like build pack authors, platform developers, build pack distributors, whatever, that sort of that sort of line of audiences. But I didn't have any super strong opinions on it.
So here's an extension spec related one. Do I go do something like this?
Now put a builder after it, and then you're done.
Put a builder after it?
So this is spec. You need to be spec build pack, spec platform, spec extension builder, because it's the builder.
Do you create
extension
a
spec.
but do you create a label for an extension that doesn't exist yet?
That's a real edge case, but I would say yes. And then if it ends up non-existing later, we can go ahead and delete the label.
Creating one label called spec/extension/builder. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll happily go and create all the labels in advance. I didn't want to put them in the readmes so that we didn't have to update the readme every time we wanted to add a new one.
Cool. To kind of move us along, do we have Dave this week to chat about extension spec? I think he's out for an amount of time, and we said this is going to pause until then. Is that right?
Yep, still out. Back Monday.
Cool. Pre-release version and lifecycle experimental API mode.
Yeah, that's mine. I incorporated updates based off of our conversation, Stephen, and the discussion from 2 Thursdays ago, I think. So I split out the experimental key as a mode versus what I'm calling pre-releases as the alphanumeric thing. And then I fleshed out a little bit more one of the alternatives around kind of unstable features being a thing we can also do. Or I guess not unstable features, but like features as experimental inside the spec.
Did you want to put it on the
So is that-
agenda?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I put it on the agenda.
Okay, we'll get to it when we get around there. Well, does this need a spec label?
I don't think so.
Just think
Did
it's
we
meta
didn't
about
put
the
we didn't
spec.
we didn't put modes in the spec, did we? For your previous one, Emily?
What are modes?
Supported, deprecated in the lifecycle descriptor file.
No, that's not a spec thing. It's just a thing about our life cycle.
No, move us along. Build run image configs must contain an env path. Anybody who works on Windows stuff available to chat about this one? Looks
This
like we
is
don't
ready to merge along with
Yeah, this is an
a
FCP
couple
already.
others. I will merge them as soon as we merge the script that merges them.
Cool. Does it need a spec label?
We're going to merge it before we approve that one, so I would say it's not important to spend time on doing it right now.
Cool. Distribution team.
Also FCP.
Same thing. I think it's ready to merge.
No spec
Yeah.
label. Cool. Application mixins. We said we were always going to skip over until StackPax was through. Any StackPax updates?
Joe is out this week. I don't know if Jesse wants to talk about StackPack RC this week.
I think folks are just now starting to kind of come over the code. So I think we're in a good spot. Just kind of start going through there and getting a checklist of things that need to
What-
be done.
Do you know what the blockers are of like what you're looking for the StackPack RC for comments and stuff? Or you mostly
The
just focus on
RFC, I've
implementation?
mostly just been doing implementation. I don't know what's, I don't know what's blocking on the RFC.
Is this ready for like core team to go through and thumbs up, thumbs down?
I think so, but Joe's the one who's been mostly doing that. But I believe he made some updates late last week. So I think it's
Okay.
ready.
Is there stuff coming out of your implementation that's going back into this RFC?
Yeah, there have been some changes that have come back from implementation and kind of been pushed into RFC. I think he's got most of those, if
Okay.
not all of them, in there somewhere.
So I'm going to go with yes, Stephen, on that.
Sorry, yes, what?
For core team to re-review.
Do we need to add anybody here?
Me?
You? Cool. And this needs a spec label, right?
Yep.
Spec.
Both build pack and platform, I think.
Yep.
What do I do? Spec, build pack, stack packs?
That's just the name of the spec.
Yeah.
Okay, we did builder in there because builder is a type of extension spec. I get it.
Yeah.
Now. You weren't labeling it. That makes sense. Cool. Build pack spec. You can change the colors later if you don't like them.
I always change the colors later.
And build pack should be able to provide default process type. Natalie, does need anything this week?
I don't think so. I updated the text to basically reflect the discussion that we had last week. So I think it's probably good for people to go back and re-review.
Cool. I'll make sure I get added to that. This got way simpler since last week, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Moving down the list. Oh, this needs a spec label too. Yeah.
Yes.
This is Buildpacks spec, right? That work? Do it in a second if it didn't take. Relax RFC mixing contract.
Isn't this yours? We FCP'd this.
I thought this was.
There's another one that's ready to merge.
Oh,
FCP.
I think, yeah, we're ready to merge it, but I think you were going to respond back to David as well as a to-do unrelated to the merging.
Right. Yep, we'll do. This is also needs a spec platform label. This is a draft. Sorry, I shouldn't have clicked on that. Layer origin metadata. Any updates from Paul? Anybody spoken to him recently? Someone want to reach out? Any? We'll just leave it.
He did recently mark it as ready for review. I think that was like a week ago or so. So probably makes sense to reach
Just
out.
review and get feedbacks on it.
Yeah, he had indicated in one of his comments that he'd like to join a working group at some point, but then weeks went by, so I don't know.
I'll go ahead and add reviewers who aren't on there. That's me and Terrence and is Joe on there. No, and Joe too. Is everybody? Yeah. Cool. And then experimental features. Joe's, I guess Terrence.
Yeah, I think I took this over. I'm just waiting for feedback from people. Which was the same as last week, I think.
Cool. Excuse me. Offline build package RFC. Is Dan here? Yes, he is.
I'm here. Yeah, so last week there was just some like renaming and that's discussion that's been kind of done. I think that like the proposed changes are all pretty much functionally equivalent. It's just like shuffling around some maps, stuff like that. So we could talk about it today. Yeah.
Is it on the agenda? Do you want to add it to the agenda if you want to chat about it? Cool.
Yep.
And this needs a spec. Label 2. What's this? This is this distribution spec. Yeah.
Yep, I think so.
Cool. And everything else is drafts. So I'm going to stop sharing and we'll dive into our first topic, which is builder extension spec. Did somebody here actually put that there, or did I just get moved from future topics because we don't have Dave?
I copied it down from future topics, so we can probably just put it back up there.
Cool. So first topic for real is lifecycle experimental API mode.
Let me pull that up. Can you see this? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So the changes I made was mostly separating out kind of the original proposal I had, which kind of combined pre-release API stuff with both the experimental mode. I think this was Steven's request. And maybe this just is split into two RFCs if we actually want to go down that path. So experimental mode is specifically about the implementation, and that maps to the lifecycle descriptor key of experimental. So you could have, say, a release version of the spec that is something where we want to test implementation, where we've stabilized the kind of spec and finalized it, but we're not sure of kind of the implementation underneath it. So it gives us that flexibility. And then also the idea about pre-release APIs, which I think from talking that time, we talked about how they would actually be treated, go through a process of them actually being cut and tagged off of that branch, off of some working branch. Was I think what we decided on. And so that's an example of that. So that can, it's treated like any other kind of version in the sense of like it can go in any of the kind of modes that the lifecycle descriptor supports there for both platform and Buildpack API. And then they map to kind of the labels that get set that was described from Emily's RFC. So I think those are most of the changes. So I think I put experimental mode specific, like these M bars specific to the experimental mode, but did not have any M bars or things related to the pre-release API. I don't know if that's something we wanted or if this is the right direction we want to go with this RFC.
Question. So for supported things post 1.0, if I have, say, 1.2 in supported, it implies that 1.1 and 1.0 are also supported. In this new workflow with pre-releases, if I have 1.2 in supported, does it imply that 1.0 alpha 1 is also supported? Sort of like how are they included or not included?
Yeah, I guess it depends on how much we want to follow Semver ranges. Maybe that's a thing to do under pre-release API to kind of elaborate on that. My inclination is that it is not implied as supported, and that's how Semver works as well. Like if you say, I want to, I guess different languages use different operators, but normally in most versions of Semver spec, like if you say I want a like release of a thing, the alpha releases do not count as less than. They're kind of like an external kind of concept in that sense. So my inclination is to just follow probably what Semver does there. And I think that probably maps of what we actually want to support there too. Like, I don't think 1.2 should imply like 1.0 alpha 1 as supported. I think ideally we want to be able to probably release this stuff and then be able to probably drop them in a reasonable fashion without being on the hook for maintaining them forever, because they're meant to be experimental, and you probably should upgrade to the actual 1.0 release instead of being stuck on 1.0 alpha 1, you know?
That makes sense.
But that's kind of my thought there. But kind of depends on where we want to sit on that spectrum. And the other change I made was the experimental section API, which I think kind of expands upon unstable features, but I think fits kind of our use case a little better than unstable features, which is the experimental section inside of an API. So we can release an official API, but have experimental features, or an experimental section, not features necessarily, inside of that. So we don't feel the pressure to get it right or block a release. But then that experimental section evolves over time. And then outline as one of the downsides of this is that since it's in the official release as part of the API, any implementation of lifecycle, or not any implementation, but probably our implementation of lifecycle would have to basically support potentially varying versions of said feature. And so that's like one of the trade-offs there. Whether every implementation has to support experimental features if it's in the spec, I was unclear of where we landed on that, but I assume not. But I think that was one of the other options we talked about as well from the discussion last time. Any other questions or thoughts? Does this fit in line with what you're looking for, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it separates the version of the specification representing, you know, how we feel about the definition itself from the descriptor file saying the lifecycle has experimental support for, you know, for a particular version of that, which I think is important. So it looks really good to me.
I feel like the distinction makes sense in that we wanted to call out the difference there. I'm not sure if in practice, I feel like these are all tools we're going to reach for, but I don't see the harm in having them. Did you say that experimental features were sort of independent of APIs, or are they versioned with an API?
I think what was said in Steven's thing is their version inside of the API. It's just like you can mark a basic section in the API as experimental. So it could be in, I don't know, like wherever you want, right? Like for StackPack, we could have a thing and say distribution as, or not distribution, but inside of both platform and Buildpack APIs as experimental. And so that was one of the alternatives I think we talked about.
What does that mean post 1.0? So if I have something in 1.0 in an experimental feature, am I allowed to make a breaking change to it in 1.1? Or like post 1.0, are we just not going to use this anymore?
I think the assumption on the experimental APIs is that they are by their nature potentially breaking because we're trying to come to we're not promising stability around the API. Because I think if it was not allowed to be breaking, there's no point in making it experimental in that sense, because we're promising it is stable.
And we can already
Right.
sort of make those sorts of changes in the OX line anyways.
Yeah. I think it's just a signal to allow us to have a longer, the benefit is like it's not locked to basically a like minor series line or whatever, which like if we were to say put a Buildpack API in like 0.7 alpha 1, the implication of that is it's going to make it into like we're kind of blocking 0.7 on the release of Stackpack, maybe finalizing or whatever, right? So I think the benefit of experimental is that we don't know how long it's going to take to get to an API we're happy with. And so we're okay with it evolving over many releases. The downside is that lifecycle will have to support potentially many versions of that thing as long as we keep it around, right? So that's kind of the trade-off.
The putting the experimental features into a version of the spec, the nice thing about that is we don't have to define here what that means because that's what the spec is for, right? That's why we have must and should, and in the experimental thing you can just describe in the spec that this may do this and it may not, and if you're using the feature, you have to, your build pack has to account for this experimental feature may be there or may not, right? Or if you're a platform that's consuming a lifecycle version for it, it's like, what I like about this is it gives us tools at every level. If we're trying to get some, create a pre-release version of the spec that adds some stuff that we're not sure of yet, we can create a version of the spec that's marked as a pre-release. If we're trying to have a long-running experimental feature that anybody who's using should be very cautious about, changing over time because it's not stable yet, we can put that in the spec and version like everything else. So yeah. It seems like it's a pretty good path forward.
I think the other downside to the experimental section is if it stays experimental forever, and then people depend on it. But I think that's the nature of anything experimental that we don't make decisions on.
Yeah, we have to be careful about when we use each of these tools, right?
Yeah. So I guess one of the things is, do you want me to move this into the actual proposal, the experimental section in API? Because it currently is under alternatives. I just wanted to flesh that out because that was a thing we talked about. But I'm happy to move it up if we want to have different ways to do different things.
In some ways, that's the option to me that seems to meet some of the needs we have today versus the other options. Right.
I'm fine with it being riding on this RFC or joint being a separate RFC. Either way, I don't think it's an alternative though. They're both, both helpful tools.
Yeah, I actually think maybe Stackpacks is not the place you want to do pre-release API stuff, but I imagine maybe it is. I think you can definitely use that tool, but I think it will be much more helpful for stabilizing at 1.0 is probably where we want to reach for that.
That makes sense.
So I don't know. I just trying to combine all the things as ahead of time, but yeah, just want to make sure everyone is also wants to move in this direction. Cool. So I guess changes from what I've heard is flesh out support under pre-release API from Emily's kind of concern around what does this mean for what lifecycle has support for versions that are greater. Like if I list 1, 2, what does it mean for kind of the pre-release APIs that are less than that? And moving basically experimental section in the API up or in the spec.
The other thing I'm thinking is these environment variables you've called out, like experimental mode. I almost wish they were referring to the unstable features rather than experimental. I wonder if that particular option, like the experimental option, to me, that seems like the one we're least likely to use. Like we've defined an API, but we're saying our support of that particular API is experimental. Like usually we put out what we think supports that API. sometimes there's something wrong with it, and then we put out a patch version that actually supports it. I don't know when we'd actually do the experimental, and I wonder if taking that out, and then there's one fewer option, it makes it less confusing, the difference between that and unstable features. Or we could call them experimental features, like we do in PAC, and then we're keeping our terminology more straight. What do people think about that? Does anyone want to make the case that like experimental, as in we've released the API, but the implementation is experimental? Does anyone make the case that that is an option we need?
Seems like it'd be useful to be able to express that.
When?
Like if we release the spec but don't have lifecycle implemented yet, and then like say the stack packs get through the RFC and spec PRs get merged. We have stack packs in a spec version, but the lifecycle implementation we don't quite trust yet. It could be an experimental version in the lifecycle.
I guess what is having trouble coming up with it, like something we would ship but don't trust, right? Like, have we implemented the spec or not? I don't know. Like, we've implemented it, but we don't trust it. I could see us, if it was like an escape hatch to ship a partially implemented spec, maybe. But like, how would we decide what we do and don't trust in that case?
I don't have strong opinions.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't in my original RFC. This kind of came out of people being not happy with the experimental key. And I think Stephen also latched onto that's what experimental key means to him when he sees it in lifecycle descriptor. I'm happy to scratch that out if that's the direction people want to take.
I mean, I think it's fine to have the flags there, right? Like that represent those things, right? I don't think it's a bad feature to add. It might not be super helpful, or we could add it later if we need to, right?
Wait, you suggesting leaving it or taking it out? I think if we can add it later, maybe we should just take it out. Because if we don't know why we want to have it, I think it could add confusion, the difference between that and unstable features. Because we'll probably want to have environment variables to turn on and off both.
I mean, it feels like something that could either be spec'd or just a feature of the lifecycle to warn in those cases, right? You know, doesn't seem necessary to proceed to the RFC if it's controversial, but I don't have an opinion about it.
Sounds like you want to remove it, Emily.
Kind of. I agree with Steven that it like makes sense and there's no harm in it, but I don't, if we don't know how and when we would use it, I don't want to add complexity just for the sake of it.
Do you think is there a case where we finalize 1.0, but we're not sure how it'll all work together until it's used in practice a little more?
If we've finalized 1.0 and we've implemented it, I can't think of a situation where I would release and call the API experimental in the lifecycle if the spec itself was released.
I guess it's the equivalent of, or to some degree, it's the equivalent of like, would you do pre or RC releases of the 1.0 implementation of the lifecycle?
I guess I would either say I would never do it, or I would do it every single time. Where the first time I implemented, I'd say it was experimental, and if no one complained, the next time I'd say it was supported. But I don't. think I'd be making a thoughtful distinction between the two of them, because I don't know what it would look like to say, like, I think I've fully implemented this spec, but it might break, you know?
I think the major versions are maybe different from the minor in the sense that potentially you are making some backwards breaking things potentially, or kind of incorporating some things that we've put off a little more. But
Yeah, but then we would just ship a patch version of the life cycle, but it'd still be supported, you know? It's like when new majors of anything come out, frequently a patch comes out afterwards, but you know, if you express that in the calling that an experimental API, I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter to me that much. I'm happy. We can leave it if everyone wants it.
I guess as we're thinking about 1.0, are we expecting to do that? Because I feel like that's probably, out of all the things, that's probably the either stack packs or that are probably the biggest use cases of it, I would think. Because you're not going to like, I guess it's a little weird because you're not going to like RC the life cycle itself, right? It's not like life cycle, this is a release candidate because it supports all these other versions, right?
I guess I see that as orthogonal. We can RC a life cycle.
So you would RC life cycle instead for like a 1.0 RC?
I don't know. Talking about lifecycle 1.0. We're talking about spec 1.0, right?
Spec 1.0, yeah, like an implementation of spec 1.0 for platform and Buildpack.
If we had finalized the spec, we implemented it, I'd probably just ship it and say it supported 1.0. And if we found something that was broken in it, I'd ship a patch up to the lifecycle and continue to say it supported 1.0. But there'd be a bug fix in the release notes. That's generally what I would do. But if people wanted to use this workflow because they thought it indicated something important, I would use it.
Okay. Sounds like no one feels actually super strongly either way.
Just a time check. We also have offline build packages in the list.
Sure. Having to move on.
Cool. I mean, unless there's any more questions, don't mean to. We should get this one through. I think we're just not a lot of strong opinions ready to approve something.
Cool.
Cool. Dan, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, happy to. Great. All right. Can people see this? Sweet.
Yep.
Alrighty. So I think that just like there was some discussion at the last working group just around some renaming some of the things here. So like, which has all been done, just kind of small updates of renaming this to be a reference. I guess the kind of bigger questions that came up were whether or not we thought that we had enough metadata at the top of each of these build packages in each of these labels that Matt McNew, you felt like this would be useful to your platform.
Yeah, I believe my concern was about relocated assets and the ability to still utilize them, especially if they were no longer at their initial canonical location. Like if the platform didn't have access or didn't want to pull from this GCR location, for example. It seems like ref now is more of a like soft pointer similar to our run images.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think that's. I guess by soft point, you just mean having just these final two pieces, or because I was expecting this to be like an actual image location, just because that would be useful for like other platforms, right?
My understanding was this was the image location that was used to generate to generate the build package.
Yep.
Why would if those assets were already inside the build package, why would a platform want that image reference?
The assets don't go inside of the build package. It's a separate image, right? This is just a reference, and this reference would, it's not, you don't have to use it to pull it from that location, but if you want to know the canonical location of the assets, then you can use this optionally to do that, but you'd still have the digest of the image and the layer diff IDs.
Oh, and the name.
Things. And there's a name for human readability too.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood that.
I thought we talked about inverting the layer diff ID to like so that the digest on the inside go on the outside and then map to the layer diff IDs.
We did. So I think that after poking through this, like functionally, it's totally the same. In fact, I just like have all of these sitting down here at the bottom, and I'm happy to like copy paste this stuff in. I feel like it's the right direction. After like writing this out, it seems a little bit cleaner to have the map go from each asset digest to the layer diff ID. I think that was a really good idea.
Just some very minor formatting stuff there. I wouldn't use that SHA-256 : notation. That's like for images usually, and this is like specifically not an images thing. It's the SHA of the object, and then that maps down into layer diff ID. Right? There's like formatting stuff there that we can deal with in the RFC. But I'd like to get some feedback on. But good to see the alternative mentioned here. I was wondering, McNew, if you have any, does that cause any trouble for KPAC not to have the diff IDs at the top?
Shouldn't matter, no.
What if you just wanted to build with some build packs? Not everything in the build package. Is there a case where you'd want to be able to pull the diff IDs? I guess you'd want to pull everything. You wouldn't know what diff IDs correspond to what build packs anyways, so you'd want to pull everything, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay. Guess that's kind of a minor update.
We look at the builder contents again, or the builder metadata.
Yeah.
So the addition here with this asset cache per build pack is unique because in a build package, the assets aren't inside the build package. So this is merely to correlate which build packages are pulling in the assets. I'm trying to understand why this is needed here.
Yeah, so this is for the case when you have a builder and some of the assets have actually just been shoved inside of the image so that you have some like offline access to them. That might not be everything, but you need some way to keep track of what's actually been put inside of the builder, right?
You can make a cached builder or an uncached builder.
Yeah.
How does the platform how can the platform correlate which assets go to exactly which build packs?
So I don't think it matters. And I don't think that we would be able to change the behavior of, like, I don't know if that would change any of the behavior. I think all of the assets will be available to any build, right? And because we can't make an ephemeral builder with just some of the assets, once we know which build packages will actually run.
Is there value in these asset caches living underneath the build packs inside the metadata, or could that just be or metadata on an external label or an
Yeah.
extra label?
So I think we could definitely pull it out. The reason that I think I put this in here in the first place was that if I guess, yeah, we could totally pull this out. It's just we already had a label. It seemed like it had a bunch of information about the build packages, and because we're already adding this field into the build package information, it seemed like a natural place to put it. But I'm happy to move it out.
Do you actually have a mapping of build pack to asset that's available, or like how would you get that metadata under a build pack ID in the builder? Because I think we have a build package to asset cache association, but I don't think we have a build pack to asset cache association. So
isn't that what we're looking at now? There's like build pack ID up the top here, and
yeah, but
asset cache
that's on the
underneath it
builder.
Yeah, how does that get generated? Is my question.
during create builder.
But then you have to, the user during create builder would have to figure out, or something would have to figure out how to map the assets to the build packs, right? And I don't know if that information is actually available to generate the label. Because if you go up to the build package asset association, or the build package file, right, there's like, you can say, here assets, and you can say, here build packs.
Yeah,
but you can't associate them.
So
wait, go up again. Sorry. Is this the builder one again?
Yeah,
looking at
this
yeah.
is
Okay.
the old
yeah.
version of that.
So that would be a reason to not put that asset cache underneath the build packs on the builder metadata, because the platform couldn't necessarily figure out which asset correspond to which build pack. But I think KPack itself would have this additional problem that if an asset package is correlated with the build package, KPack has the mechanism to create builders with subsets of build packs that are inside of a build package. So how would, or how should KPack decide when to pull assets if a subset of the build packs in a build package are being utilized, if that build package referenced assets?
Yeah, I think the meta build package has to have nested metadata about assets as well.
Nested metadata that was correlating build packs
yeah.
to specific assets.
So all build packages contain information about their assets. And if you are a build package that includes other build packages, you are responsible for maintaining that correlation in the label, right? Because you as a build package don't actually require any assets. So there are none at your top level, but you nest other things underneath you, and those may be nested as well. And that sort of nesting association between the actual build pack and the assets that that actual build pack wants to do, even if you are a meta build pack.
The alternative would be KPack could look for a given build pack ID, figure out which build package the build pack ID came from, figure out what assets are associated with that build package, and then include all of those assets in the build.
How does it find out, right? Like the original build package information is dropped when a meta build pack is created. A meta build package is created.
What I'm saying is like KPack, the inputs are all build packages, right? And those build packages have into that store, and those build packages have assets associated with them. You can't figure out what, you definitely can't do it in a granular way, but you could, at whatever coarse grained level the operator provided the build packages into that store, you could pull all of the assets for the associated build package when any of the IDs are referenced to make sure you have it. I'm not saying
like
you
a
could do
pretty
that.
poor performance,
Right.
Especially if you're like pulling out just one build package and suddenly everything is being pulled in from that one build package, all the assets, which is probably larger than the build packs themselves.
Yeah, I just wanted to give the alternative to Ben's suggestion. I think Ben's suggestion is the right thing to do, probably.
I wonder if we should put assets their like name and digest in Buildpack TOML. So even if you never package them offline, never make an asset cache, wherever your Buildpack metadata goes, metadata about assets that it is aware of goes with it, and then sort of what caches exist and which assets are in which cache is a different label, right?
It's already there. It's already there in many cases, right? Because there's that metadata field, and a lot of build packs happen to put the digests of the individual dependencies that we're going to key the top level with into that file already. It would just be codifying that for build packs that are using it already. It kind of fits together.
Might be easier for everyone, and it makes things work smoothly.
Could you explain that again, Emily?
In the Buildpack TOML for your build pack, there'd be a section where you'd list assets that the build pack can use in a build, including their name and digest. And then whenever you're creating a build package from a build pack, you're keeping that assets with the rest of your build pack data. So you always have the mapping of build pack to assets. So far, I haven't described any way to know where those assets are. In some ways, asset caching is separate, where you say these assets live in this cache, and you have a separate label that's describing where to find different assets on an image.
That's basically the break between, or the separation between Buildpack TOML and package TOML, right?
Yeah.
And so we could move that same kind of information into Buildpack TOML, which makes sense, and then have an asset TOML or a package TOML or something, or another entry in package TOML that tells you where to get those things.
We've said that over time we want to get rid of package TOML once we have a registry, right? Package TOML is like just a thing for sourcing things where we don't want to put the real locations in Buildpack TOML, but we don't have that problem here because we're not talking about sourcing build packs. We're talking about sourcing something that's native, that's important to the build pack itself, which is like dependencies that it's going to install. So I would definitely support pushing that into Buildpack TOML, where it seems like there's no reason to wait on that like we're doing for the locations of other build packs in the meta build pack case. So strongly support moving that into Buildpack TOML.
Okay.
I think that then solves the problem of the association, and then you can include the build pack ID to asset association in the builder metadata. We also want to make sure that association is present in the build package metadata so the KPack can decide how to construct builders using correct assets.
Yeah, it might be desirable if you could have the exact same format for the build package metadata, having build packs reference build or asset packages as the builder metadata itself, which is something that today we have. So if we could hold that, it'd be useful.
We are right at time. Dan, is this helpful? Did you get good stuff out of it?
Yeah.
And then come back. Sorry, I know it's been many iterations, but I think we're very close to having a super useful thing. You want to bring it back next week or tomorrow? You can keep chatting. Cool.
Yeah.
And feel free to add everybody for approvals once it's in the state. You don't have to wait for a working group meeting. I think we all know what's going on.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.